Captain Veltar pressed his clawed hand against the observation deck's cool metal surface as his ship drifted silently above the blue and green world below. The planet looked peaceful from this distance, with white clouds swirling over vast oceans and brown continents. His science officer, Lieutenant Kixon, stood beside him, holding a data pad that glowed with soft purple light. "Third planet from their star," Kixon reported in his usual calm voice. "They call it Earth. The dominant species calls themselves humans. Our scans show they use chemical combustion for transportation, basic metalworking, and primitive electronic devices." Veltar nodded slowly. After 300 years of exploring the galaxy for the Zephyrian Empire, he had seen dozens of worlds like this one. Young civilizations that burned fossil fuels, built simple machines, and had barely learned to leave their home planet. The Empire classified such worlds as Developmental Stage 2, advanced enough to be useful, but primitive enough to integrate easily into galactic society. "Any signs of faster-than-light travel?" Veltar asked, though he already knew the answer. "None, Captain. They use chemical rockets to reach their own moon. Very basic stuff. Our computers estimate they are at least 5,000 years behind our technology level." Veltar walked to his command chair, a massive seat that adjusted to his tall, thin frame. The Zephyrians had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years, bringing peace and order to hundreds of worlds. They had perfected the art of first contact long ago. Show the primitives some advanced technology, offer them membership in the Empire, and watch them gratefully accept their place in galactic civilization. "Begin standard first contact procedures," Veltar ordered. "Send them our basic greeting message in their most common languages." The communications officer, a young Zephyrian named Colette, worked at her station. "Message sent, Captain. It includes our standard offer of peaceful contact and an invitation to join the galactic community." Veltar expected to wait several hours for a response. Primitive species usually needed time to overcome their fear and figure out how to reply. But the answer came back in less than 10 minutes. "Captain," Colette said, her voice confused, "we have a response. But it's strange." "Strange how?" "They sent back our message, but they corrected the mathematics in our universal translator. They say our gravitational constant calculations are wrong for this region of space." Veltar frowned. The Empire's universal translator was perfect. It had worked flawlessly on every world they had ever visited. "That's impossible. Run a diagnostic on our equipment." While the technicians checked their systems, more messages arrived from Earth. The humans had questions about the Empire's faster-than-light communication method. They wanted to know why the Zephyrians used quantum entanglement instead of what they called probability wave manipulation. They asked if the Empire had considered using what they called dimensional folding for their long-range sensors. "Sir," the chief science officer reported, "our equipment is working perfectly. But these humans are asking about technologies that don't exist." "What do you mean?" "Probability wave manipulation is theoretically possible, but it would require computational power beyond our capabilities. Dimensional folding for sensors is pure fantasy. No civilization has ever achieved such things." Veltar studied the stream of messages coming from Earth. The humans seemed friendly enough, even excited about meeting other intelligent life. But their questions made no sense. They asked about things that were impossible, mentioned technologies that couldn't work, and somehow found errors in Empire systems that had never failed before. "Send them a demonstration of our gravity manipulation technology," Veltar decided. "Show them how we keep our ship stable. That should impress them." The message went out, along with detailed sensor readings showing how the Empire's gravity generators worked. The response came back even faster this time. "Captain," Colette reported, sounding even more confused, "they say it's very interesting, but they want to know why we use such a complicated method." "Complicated?" "Our gravity manipulation is the pinnacle of Empire engineering. They're asking why we don't just," and I'm reading this exactly as they sent it, "convince the local space-time to bend naturally instead of forcing it with energy fields." The bridge fell silent. Veltar had never heard of such a thing. Space-time didn't bend naturally. You had to force it with massive energy expenditures and complex field generators. That was basic physics, sir, the science officer added quietly. They also sent us a mathematical proof showing how our current method wastes 97% of its energy. And the math checks out. Veltar felt something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of exploration. Doubt. These humans were supposed to be primitive. They burned chemicals for energy and used metal tools. Yet somehow they were correcting Empire science and suggesting improvements to technologies that had worked perfectly for thousands of years. Open a direct communication channel, Veltar ordered. I want to speak with whoever is answering our messages. The main screen flickered to life, showing a small room filled with primitive equipment. A human female sat in front of what looked like a simple electronic device. She had dark hair, wore simple clothes, and smiled warmly when she saw the Zephyrian captain. Hello, she said in accented but clear galactic standard. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen from the United Earth Science Council. It's wonderful to meet you, Captain Veltar. How do you know my name? We never sent that information. Dr. Chen looked puzzled. It was in your ship's identification signal. The quantum signature includes crew manifest data. Didn't you know that? Veltar glanced at his communications officer, who shook her head frantically. Their quantum identification signals were encrypted with the Empire's most advanced security protocols. No primitive civilization should be able to read them, let alone extract specific crew information. Dr. Chen, Veltar said carefully, our scans show that your civilization uses very basic technology. How were you able to decode our signals? Oh, that. Dr. Chen waved her hand dismissively. My daughter figured that out. She's 12 and very good with puzzles. Your encryption is quite clever, but it assumes the decoder will use linear mathematics. We've been using non-linear approaches for decades. Non-linear mathematics? Sure. It's much more efficient for complex problems. Most of our children learn it in elementary school along with regular math. Veltar felt his world shifting beneath him. The Empire's greatest mathematicians had spent centuries developing linear mathematical systems. Non-linear approaches were considered theoretical curiosities, too complex for practical use. Yet these humans taught them to children. Dr. Chen, he said slowly, would you be willing to demonstrate some of your technology for us? Of course, though I should warn you, most of our stuff is pretty old-fashioned. We keep meaning to upgrade, but the current systems work fine for our needs. As Dr. Chen began showing what she called primitive human technology, Veltar realized that everything the Empire thought it knew about technological development might be wrong. The humans weren't primitive at all. They were something far more dangerous. They were different. And in a galaxy where the Empire had spent 10,000 years believing there was only one path to advancement, different was the most terrifying thing of all. Ambassador Kreeth adjusted her formal robes as she stepped off the shuttle onto Earth's surface. The human spaceport looked exactly as primitive as the Empire's reports had suggested. Simple metal buildings, basic concrete landing pads, and crude mechanical equipment moving cargo containers. Everything screamed of a civilization barely past its industrial age. She had come to Earth with a simple mission: negotiate the planet's peaceful integration into the Galactic Empire. In her 3,000 years as the Empire's chief diplomat, she had completed this same task on over 200 worlds. The process was always identical: arrive with superior technology, demonstrate the Empire's advanced capabilities, and watch the primitive species gratefully accept their place in galactic civilization. A small group of humans waited for her at the edge of the landing pad. They wore simple clothes and carried basic electronic devices. No advanced weapons, no force field generators, no sign of any technology beyond basic metallurgy and electronics. Exactly what she expected from a Stage 2 civilization. Welcome to Earth, Ambassador Kreeth, said a human female who stepped forward from the group. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. We're honored by your visit. Kreeth had studied human language and customs during her journey. These creatures were remarkably similar to dozens of other primitive species she had encountered. Bipedal, carbon-based, with basic tool-making abilities and simple social structures. Thank you for receiving me. Dr. Chen, I bring greetings from the Galactic Empire and an offer of membership in our great civilization. As they walked toward the human facilities, Kreith began her standard demonstration. She activated her personal gravity nullifier, floating several inches above the ground. The humans watched with interest but showed none of the awe she expected. "That's very elegant," Dr. Chen commented. "We experimented with personal gravity manipulation about 50 years ago, but the energy requirements were too high for practical use." Kreith stopped floating. "You experimented with gravity manipulation?" "Oh yes. My grandfather worked on the project. They got it working, but it used too much power. We decided that walking was more efficient for daily transportation." This was not the response Kreith expected. Primitive species were supposed to be amazed by gravity control, not treat it as an inefficient curiosity their ancestors had already explored. They entered a simple building that the humans called their science center. The interior looked as primitive as the exterior. Basic metal furniture, simple computer terminals, and walls covered with what appeared to be hand-drawn diagrams. Kreith relaxed slightly. Whatever the humans thought they had achieved with gravity, their facilities showed their true technological level. "Would you like to see some of our current projects?" Dr. Chen asked. "Certainly. I'd be happy to offer guidance on how Empire science might help advance your research." Dr. Chen led her to a simple desk where a human male sat working at what looked like a basic computer terminal. The screen showed primitive green text on a black background, nothing like the advanced holographic displays used throughout the Empire. "This is Dr. James Morrison," Dr. Chen explained. "He's working on quantum field analysis." Kreith smiled politely. Quantum field analysis required massive computational arrays and teams of specialists. The Empire's most advanced facilities could barely handle such complex calculations. The idea that a primitive human was attempting it on a simple computer was almost amusing. "What specific aspect of quantum fields are you studying?" she asked, expecting to hear about basic particle interactions or simple wave functions. Dr. Morrison looked up from his screen. "I'm mapping the probability matrices for 11-dimensional space-time interactions. We think there might be a more efficient way to handle faster-than-light communication if we can figure out how to nudge probability waves instead of forcing quantum entanglement." Kreith stared at him. 11-dimensional analysis was theoretical, even for the Empire's greatest scientists, and probability wave manipulation was pure fantasy, mathematically possible but requiring computational power that didn't exist anywhere in the galaxy. "May I see your calculations?" she asked weakly. Dr. Morrison turned his screen toward her. The primitive display showed equations that made Kreith's head spin. The mathematics was far beyond anything she had studied, using approaches that Empire science considered impossible. But more shocking was the fact that he was running these calculations on a computer that looked like it belonged in a museum. How is this machine handling such complex mathematics? "Oh, this old thing." Dr. Morrison patted his computer affectionately. "It's not very fast, but it gets the job done. The quantum processing units are built into the microchips. We've been using quantum computers for about 60 years now." Kreith felt the world spinning around her. Quantum computers were the Empire's newest, most advanced technology. They had been developed only 20 years ago and required facilities the size of entire buildings to operate. Yet this human was treating them like old, reliable tools. "Dr. Chen," Kreith said carefully, "your Captain Veltar's report mentioned that your civilization uses chemical rockets for space travel." "That's right. They're simple and reliable. But if you have quantum computers and gravity manipulation, why haven't you developed faster-than-light travel?" Dr. Chen looked puzzled. "We have. Several different methods, actually. But they're terribly expensive to operate. Chemical rockets work fine for getting to the moon and our near-space facilities. Why waste energy on exotic physics when simple chemistry does the job?" Kreith sat down heavily in a nearby chair. This couldn't be happening. These humans were supposed to be primitive. They lived in simple buildings, used basic materials, and flew chemical rockets. Yet they treated the Empire's most advanced technologies as old-fashioned curiosities they had abandoned for being impractical. "Dr. Chen, would you mind showing me one of these faster-than-light methods?" "Of course. Tommy, bring over the dimensional folder." A young human, barely past adolescence, walked over carrying what looked like a simple metal box the size of a book. He set it on the desk next to Dr. Morrison's computer. "This is a Mark 7 dimensional folder," Dr. Chen explained. "We use them for sending messages to our research stations around other stars." It creates a small fold in space-time and pushes information through. Kreith stared at the innocent-looking box. Dimensional folding was pure theory. Empire scientists had written papers proving it was impossible. The energy requirements alone would require the output of an entire star. How does it work? Dr. Chen opened the box, revealing simple electronic components that looked like they came from a primitive radio. The trick is not to fight the natural tendency of space-time to fold. You just have to convince it that folding is the most comfortable state, much more efficient than trying to force it. Convince space-time? Well, not literally. But if you approach the mathematics from a harmony perspective rather than a conquest perspective, the energy requirements drop by about 1,000,000%. Kreith had spent 3,000 years studying diplomacy, science, and the art of integrating primitive civilizations into the empire. Nothing in her experience had prepared her for this. These humans weren't primitive. They weren't even advanced in the traditional sense. They were something completely outside the empire's understanding of how technology and civilization were supposed to develop. Dr. Chen, she said slowly, I need to ask you something important. Why do you still use chemical rockets in simple buildings if you have access to such advanced technology? Because they work, Dr. Chen replied as if it were obvious. Why make things complicated when simple solutions are more reliable? Our rockets get us where we need to go. Our buildings keep us comfortable. Our computers handle the calculations we need. Adding unnecessary complexity just creates more things that can break. As Kreith sat in that simple human building, surrounded by technology that shouldn't exist, she realized that everything the Empire believed about technological development was wrong. Advancement wasn't about building more complex machines or using more energy. It wasn't about conquering physics or forcing the universe to obey your will. The humans had discovered something far more profound: how to work with the universe instead of against it. And that revelation was going to change everything. She reached for her communication device to contact the Empire, then stopped. How could she possibly explain this in a way that anyone would believe? High researcher Zondak stood in the center of what humans called their main laboratory, feeling more confused than he had in his 800 years of scientific study. The room looked like a primitive workshop. Simple metal tables held basic equipment that belonged in a museum. Hand-drawn diagrams covered the walls instead of advanced holographic displays. Everything screamed of a civilization barely past its Stone Age, yet the readings from his instruments made no sense at all. Sir, his assistant Kelwin reported, the quantum resonance detector is showing impossible readings from that simple device. Zondak looked at the object in question. It appeared to be nothing more than a child's toy, a small metal top that spun when wound up. A human child had been playing with it in the corner while the adults worked. According to Zondak's instruments, that simple toy was generating quantum field fluctuations that required massive energy sources to produce. Run the diagnostic again. The equipment must be malfunctioning. I've run it 6 times, sir. The readings are consistent. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the human scientist assigned to guide their visit, noticed their confusion. She was a small woman with gray hair who spoke softly and moved with careful precision. Like all the humans they had met, she showed none of the awe that primitive species usually displayed when encountering Empire technology. Is there a problem with your instruments? Dr. Tanaka asked politely. They're detecting quantum field fluctuations from that child's toy, Zondak replied. Obviously impossible, but we can't find the source of the malfunction. Dr. Tanaka glanced at the spinning top and smiled. Oh, that. Kenji's top uses spin field resonance to maintain its momentum. It's based on principles we discovered about 200 years ago. Completely harmless, but it does interact with local quantum fields. Zondak stared at her. Spin field resonance is theoretical. No one has ever achieved stable implementation. Really? We use it in lots of everyday items. Kenji's grandmother made that top in her workshop last week. It's a traditional design passed down through families. The high researcher felt his scientific worldview cracking. According to Empire physics, spin field resonance required controlled laboratory conditions and equipment worth more than most planets. Yet this human grandmother was apparently building such devices in her home workshop as children's toys. Dr. Tanaka, would it be possible to examine some of your more advanced equipment? Of course. Though I should warn you, most of our current projects are pretty basic compared to what you're probably used to. She led them to another table where a human teenager was working on what looked like a simple electronic device. The boy couldn't have been more than 16 years old. Yet he was casually manipulating components that Zondak's instruments identified as containing stable micro-singularities. "This is David," Dr. Tanaka explained. "He's working on his school science project." "School project?" Kelvin whispered. "I'm trying to build a better battery," David explained cheerfully. "The current ones only store energy for about 300 years before needing replacement. I think I can get that up to 500 years by adjusting the quantum containment fields." Zondak sat down heavily on a nearby stool. 300-year batteries were beyond Empire technology. The most advanced energy storage systems in the galaxy could barely maintain charge for 50 years. Yet this child was complaining that 3 centuries wasn't long enough and treating it as a simple engineering problem to solve for homework. "David," Zondak said carefully, "what happens if your quantum containment fields fail?" "Oh, nothing dramatic. The energy just dissipates harmlessly into dimensional space. We learned not to build things that explode when they break about 400 years ago. Explosions are usually a sign that you're fighting the physics instead of working with them." Dr. Tanaka nodded approvingly. "David's applying some very elegant principles. Would you like to see how it works?" Before Zondak could object, she picked up the device and began explaining its operation. According to her casual description, David had created a stable interface between normal space and what she called dimensional energy reservoirs. The mathematics involved were so complex that Empire computers would need months to solve them. Yet this teenager had apparently worked them out in his head during lunch break. "Dr. Tanaka," Zondak said slowly, "how is it possible for a child to understand such advanced physics?" "Advanced? This is pretty basic stuff. David learned the fundamentals in elementary school. Most children his age could build something similar." "Most children? Well, sure. We start teaching quantum mechanics around age 7. Not the mathematical formulations, of course, those come later. But the basic intuitive understanding is important for everyday life." Zondak's assistant, Kelvin, had been scanning the room with a broad-spectrum analyzer. He approached with a look of panic on his face. "Sir?" he whispered. "Every piece of equipment in this room is showing impossible readings. That coffee machine is generating gravitational anomalies. The ceiling lights are tapping into zero-point energy. Even the floor tiles are composed of matter arranged in quantum superposition states." Zondak looked around the simple, primitive-looking laboratory with new eyes. What he had taken for basic equipment was actually technology so advanced that the Empire couldn't even build detection instruments sensitive enough to properly analyze it. "Dr. Tanaka, your coffee machine, oh, that old thing? It uses microgravity fields to blend the coffee more evenly. My husband built it for me last year, when I complained about uneven brewing. Nothing fancy. And your lights? 0-point taps. Much more efficient than the nuclear reactors we used to use. Plus they never burn out. Your floor? Quantum stable matter. Lasts practically forever, and adjusts its properties based on what you need. Soft when you want comfort, hard when you need a stable work surface." Zondak realized that they weren't standing in a primitive laboratory at all. They were inside a technological marvel that surpassed anything the Empire had ever built. And the humans treated it all as ordinary, everyday equipment that wasn't worth thinking about. "Dr. Tanaka, I need to understand something. If you have access to such incredible technology, why does your civilization appear so primitive from space? Why do you still use chemical rockets and simple buildings?" Dr. Tanaka considered the question seriously. "I think it's a matter of philosophy. We learned long ago that the goal of technology should be to make life better, not to prove how clever we are. Chemical rockets are simple, reliable, and get us where we need to go. Complex ships that can cross the galaxy in minutes are impressive. But what's the point if they break down constantly and require teams of specialists to maintain?" She gestured around the laboratory. "All of this technology serves specific purposes. The quantum floor makes our work more comfortable. The zero-point lights let us see clearly without wasting energy. David's battery will power his grandmother's house for centuries without maintenance. We don't build things to show off. We build them to solve problems. But surely you must have weapons, military technology. Why would we need weapons that could destroy planets? What problem would that solve? If someone threatens us, it's much more efficient to understand why they're threatening us and address the underlying issue." As Zondak stood in that impossible laboratory, surrounded by technology that made the Empire's greatest achievements look like primitive cave paintings, He began to understand why these humans seemed so dangerous to the established galactic order. They hadn't just developed better tools. They had developed a completely different relationship with the universe itself. Where the Empire conquered and controlled, humans collaborated and harmonized. Where the Empire built complexity upon complexity, humans found elegant simplicity that could accomplish anything. And most terrifying of all, they did it all so casually that they barely thought it was worth mentioning. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years by being the most technologically advanced civilization anyone had ever encountered. But these humans made the Empire look like children playing with rocks and sticks. The balance of power in the galaxy was about to change forever. The Imperial science vessel, Eternal Truth, hung in space near Earth's moon, its massive laboratories humming with desperate activity. High researcher Zondak stood before a table covered with human devices that his team had been trying to understand for 3 months. Each attempt at reverse engineering had ended in spectacular failure. Report, Zondak ordered his exhausted team. Chief Engineer Vaxtel looked up from a pile of melted metal that had once been a human child's toy. The spinning top project is a complete failure. We've tried 17 different approaches to replicate the spin field resonance effect. 3 attempts resulted in laboratory explosions. The rest simply don't work. What about the coffee machine? Worse, we can't even figure out how it generates microgravity fields. According to our physics, the components shouldn't interact at all. When we tried to build a copy using Empire technology, it created a gravitational anomaly that nearly pulled the ship into a black hole. Zondak moved to the next station where technical specialist Mordan was staring at a simple human battery with the expression of someone trying to solve an impossible puzzle. The battery analysis? Sir, this device violates at least 12 fundamental laws of physics. It stores more energy than should be possible in a space that size. It's been running for over 200 years without degradation. And when we tried to open one to study its construction, it just stopped existing. The quantum containment fields collapsed and all the matter inside dispersed into what the humans call dimensional space. We have no idea where that matter went or how to retrieve it. Zondak felt a headache building behind his eyes. 3 months of intensive study by the Empire's best scientists had produced nothing but failures and more questions. Every human device they examined worked perfectly as long as they didn't try to understand it. The moment they attempted to analyze or replicate the technology, everything fell apart. Sir, Communications Officer Kellen called from across the laboratory. Dr. Tanaka is requesting permission to come aboard. She says she might be able to help with our research problems. Zondak almost laughed. The idea that a primitive human could help the Empire's greatest scientists was absurd. But after 3 months of complete failure, absurd was starting to look appealing. Permission granted. Dr. Tanaka arrived an hour later, looking around the Imperial laboratory with obvious curiosity. The Empire's most advanced research facility was a monument to technological achievement, with holographic displays, quantum processors, and equipment worth more than most planetary economies. Impressive, she said politely. Very elaborate. Zondak decided to be direct. Dr. Tanaka, we have been trying to understand how your technology works. We have failed completely. Every attempt to replicate your devices ends in failure or disaster. Dr. Tanaka nodded sympathetically. That's not surprising. What approach have you been using? Standard Imperial scientific methodology. We analyze the components, determine their individual functions, map their interactions, and then rebuild them using our technology. Dr. Tanaka walked over to the remains of the coffee machine experiment. I think I see the problem. You're treating our technology like it's just very complicated Empire technology, but it's not. What do you mean? May I show you something? Dr. Tanaka pulled a simple device from her pocket. It looked like a metal cube the size of her thumb. This is a dimensional key. We use them to access storage space that exists outside normal dimensions. She pressed a spot on the cube and suddenly the air above it filled with objects that hadn't been there a moment before. Tools, supplies, even a comfortable chair materialized out of nowhere. Fascinating, Zondak breathed. How much can it store? Theoretically unlimited. The storage space exists in folded dimensions, so physical size isn't a constraint. Show us how it works. Dr. Tanaka smiled sadly. That's just it. I can't. Not in a way that would let you build one. Why not? Because it doesn't work through mechanical principles. It works through what you might call philosophical principles. Zondak stared at her. Philosophy? That's not science, isn't it? Tell me, how does your gravity generator work? It uses controlled energy fields to bend space-time, according to precise mathematical formulas. So you force space-time to do what you want by applying enough energy. Exactly. This dimensional key works differently. Instead of forcing anything, it asks the universe politely if it would mind folding a little space for storage. Since folded dimensions are a natural property of space-time anyway, the universe is usually happy to cooperate. That's impossible. You can't ask space-time to do anything. It's not alive, Dr. Tanaka considered this. Not alive in the way we understand life, no. But responsive to intention, to harmony, to working with its natural tendencies instead of against them. Our experience suggests yes. Technical specialist Mordan laughed. That's mysticism, not science, is it? What's the difference between mysticism and science you don't understand yet? The laboratory fell silent. Dr. Tanaka walked over to where young David's battery experiment sat in a containment field. This battery doesn't store energy by cramming it into physical space. It creates a harmonious relationship with the quantum foam and politely asks the universe to remember a particular energy state. When you need power, you remind the universe of what it agreed to remember. But that requires the universe to be conscious. Chief Engineer Vaxtel protested. Does it? Or does it just require the universe to be more responsive to intention and harmony than your science assumes? Dr. Tanaka walked around the laboratory examining the Empire's advanced equipment. All of this is very impressive. You've built machines that can force the universe to obey your will through sheer computational power and energy application. It's like, imagine if music was created by using enormous machines to push air molecules into exactly the right patterns. How else would you create music? Zondak asked. Dr. Tanaka smiled. You could learn to work with the natural resonance properties of air and materials. You could create harmony instead of forcing specific frequencies. The music would be just as beautiful, but it would require far less energy and be much more sustainable. But how do you teach someone to create harmony with space-time? The same way you teach someone to create harmony with music. Practice, patience, and a fundamental shift in how you think about your relationship with the universe. Zondak felt his scientific training rebelling against everything she was saying. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Human technology worked through principles that Empire science couldn't even recognize, let alone replicate. Dr. Tanaka, if what you're saying is true, then everything the Empire knows about physics is wrong. Not wrong, she said gently. Just incomplete. You've discovered one way to interact with the universe. The way of force and control. It works, but it's not the only way. We've discovered the way of cooperation and harmony. Both approaches can achieve remarkable things, but your way produces technology that we can't understand or replicate, and your way produces technology that we find unnecessarily complex and energy wasteful. Neither approach is superior. They're just different. As Dr. Tanaka prepared to leave the Imperial research vessel, Zondak realized that the Empire faced a choice that would determine the future of galactic civilization. They could continue trying to force human technology to fit into Imperial scientific frameworks, doomed to eternal failure. Or they could accept that there were other ways of understanding the universe, ways that might require them to question everything they thought they knew about science, technology, and their place in the cosmos. The implications were staggering. If humans were right, then the Empire's 10,000 years of technological development had been like trying to swim upstream when they could, have been flowing with the current all along. But learning to flow with the current would mean admitting that the Empire's approach had been wrong from the beginning, and that was a revelation that could shake the foundations of their entire civilization. Emperor Thexamar stood before the enormous windows of his palace throne room, staring out at the capital city that stretched beyond the horizon. For 10,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire had ruled the galaxy through superior technology and military might. Every species they encountered either submitted to imperial authority or was conquered. It was the natural order of things, until now. The reports from Earth lay scattered across his massive desk. Months of testimony from his best scientists, diplomats, and military advisors, all reaching the same impossible conclusion. Humanity represented something completely outside imperial understanding. Your Majesty, Chancellor Kolrex said from behind him, The High Council is ready to receive your decision regarding the Earth situation. Thexmar turned to face the assembled leaders of the Empire. Generals, scientists, administrators, and advisors who had helped him maintain galactic peace for 3 centuries. All of them waited for his command to deal with the human problem. Summarize our options, the Emperor commanded. Admiral Zektar stepped forward first. Military conquest remains viable. Despite their unusual technology, humans show no interest in weapons development. A single Imperial battle fleet could overwhelm their defenses within days. And then what, Admiral? Our scientists cannot understand their technology. Conquered humans would be of no value to the Empire if they refused to share their knowledge. Chief Economist Vulson spoke next. Economic integration is problematic, Your Majesty. Humans show little interest in Imperial currency or trade goods. They seem to produce everything they need using their incomprehensible manufacturing methods. What about standard diplomatic incorporation? Thexmar asked. Ambassador Kreeth shook her head. Impossible, Your Majesty. Standard incorporation assumes technological dependence. Humans neither need our technology nor want our protection. They're completely self-sufficient. High Researcher Zondak cleared his throat nervously. Your Majesty, there is one other option we haven't discussed. Speak. We could ask them to teach us. The throne room fell silent. The suggestion was so radical that several council members looked physically shocked. Teach us? Admiral Zektar sputtered. The Empire does not learn from primitives. They're not primitives, Zondak replied quietly. They never were. We just couldn't see what they had achieved because it was so different from our own path. Emperor Thexmar studied his chief scientist carefully. Explain. Your Majesty, I have spent months trying to understand human technology. I've concluded that they haven't developed better tools than ours. They've developed a better relationship with the universe itself. Meaning what? We conquer physics through force and complexity. We build bigger machines, use more energy, create more elaborate systems. It works, but it's inefficient. Humans learn to cooperate with physics instead of fighting it. They achieve the same results with a fraction of the energy and complexity. Chancellor Colrex laughed. You're suggesting that the galaxy's most advanced civilization should take lessons from a species that still uses chemical rockets? Those chemical rockets are a choice, not a limitation, Zondak replied. Humans could cross the galaxy instantly if they wanted to. They just see no reason to waste energy on such things when simpler methods accomplish their goals. Emperor Thexmar walked to his desk and picked up one of the reports. According to your analysis, human children learn principles that our greatest scientists consider theoretical impossibilities. Yes, Your Majesty. But they don't learn them as complex mathematical formulas. They learn them as intuitive understanding of how the universe works. To them, quantum mechanics is as natural as breathing. And you believe we could learn these same principles? I believe we could try. But it would require us to question everything we think we know about science and technology. The Emperor considered this. For 10,000 years, the Empire had grown stronger by absorbing useful technologies from conquered civilizations. But they had never encountered a civilization whose entire approach to existence was fundamentally different from their own. What would such learning require? Complete openness to new ways of thinking. Humans don't just use different technology. They think about reality differently. They see the universe as something to cooperate with rather than conquer. Admiral Zektar stood up angrily. Your Majesty, this is absurd. The Empire's strength comes from our superior technology and disciplined thinking. We cannot abandon our principles for mystical nonsense, can we not? Thexmar asked quietly. Admiral, your ships are powered by fusion reactors that require constant maintenance and massive fuel supplies. Human children build toys that tap unlimited energy from quantum foam. Which approach is truly superior? The Emperor made his decision. Send a message to Dr. Chen on Earth. Tell her that the Galactic Empire formally requests permission to send students to learn from human teachers. The throne room erupted in shocked voices, but Thexmar continued. Furthermore, Earth will be granted full independence and equal status in any future galactic confederation. We are not adding them to our empire. We are asking to learn from them. 6 months later, the first Imperial learning ships arrived at Earth. They carried not soldiers or administrators, but students. Young Zephyrians, Altarians, and members of dozens of other species, all eager to learn new ways of thinking about the universe. The humans welcomed them with the same casual friendliness they showed everyone. No grand ceremonies, no political negotiations, Just simple classrooms where human teachers began the slow process of helping Imperial minds understand harmony instead of conquest. Dr. Chen stood before a class of 30 young aliens, watching them struggle with concepts that human children learned intuitively. "Remember," she said patiently, "you're not trying to force the quantum field to obey you. You're trying to understand what it wants to do naturally and then work with that tendency." A young Zephyrian raised her hand. "But how do we know what the quantum field wants?" "The same way you know what music wants to do. You listen, you feel, you learn to recognize harmony and discord. But quantum fields aren't alive." Dr. Chen smiled. "Aren't they? Or are we just using too narrow a definition of what life means?" In another classroom, a human teenager was teaching advanced mathematics to Imperial scientists who had spent centuries believing that linear approaches were the only logical way to solve complex problems. "Think of mathematics like a conversation," he explained. "Instead of forcing numbers to give you the answer you want, try asking them what they're trying to tell you." The Imperial students struggled, but gradually, some began to understand. They started seeing patterns they had never noticed before, finding elegant solutions to problems that had required massive computational power. The changes rippled outward from Earth like waves in a pond. Imperial technology slowly became more efficient as engineers learned to work with natural forces instead of against them. Scientific breakthroughs accelerated as researchers began approaching problems from harmony-based perspectives. But the deepest changes were philosophical. The Empire had always seen itself as separate from and superior to the universe around them. They were conquerors, bending reality to their will through superior technology and disciplined thinking. Humans taught them a different way. They showed Imperial citizens how to see themselves as part of the universe, not its masters. How to achieve incredible things not through force but through understanding and cooperation. Emperor Thexmar stood once again before his palace windows, but the view had changed. The capital city below hummed with new energy. Buildings that had once required massive power systems now drew their energy gracefully from quantum foam. Transport systems that had once forced their way through space now flowed along natural gravitational currents. The Galactic Empire still existed, but it was no longer an empire in the traditional sense. It had become something new, a confederation of species learning to live in harmony with the universe instead of trying to conquer it. And at the center of it all was a small blue planet whose inhabitants had learned the most profound truth of all, that the universe was not something to be conquered, but something to dance with. The galaxy would never be the same.